So, in this chapter, we want to look a little bit at fiscal policy. And more specifically, when we're talking about fiscal policy, we're talking about the government, whether it be the federal government, which is another way of saying the national government, or a state government, or even a local government, providing some um, economic influence. The notion that the government would have any role, that we would have fiscal policy having an impact, that really started to emerge with John Maynard Keynes. And the most earliest and the most classic example we think of is during the Great Depression, where um, Franklin Roosevelt, the president, hired a bunch of people to like dig ditches and stuff like that. Right, we can kind of just think here to. Can I change the settings on this? I can't. I don't think. Let me see. It falls all under the New Deal. I'm not looking for a really long clip here. Let me find the one that I always like the most. I do actually have a favorite. It's this. It's really short. Um, it's from 1933. What I like about it is that you can um, see people who were actors at the time um, just beginning in their career, getting a job to make this kind of newsreel. Um, let's see here. So when you saw there, it said NRA. Today, it's known as the National Rifle Administration Association, National Rifle Association. Back in this time, it was known as the National Recovery Administration, which basically stood for a government uh, organization, government body formed by the president for recovery from the Great Depression. This person right here, um, he would later become a pretty famous actor. Even at this time, he was pretty famous. His name was Jimmy Durante. If you've seen the old Frosty the Snowman, like the one from like the 1960s or 1970s, this guy is the voice of Frosty the Snowman.
You got a president now. He gave the land a new deal. You hold the cards, now you deal. You put shoulders to the plow. He gave us what we asked for, now pay him back somehow. Step out in front, get back of the president, and give a man a job. He bore the brunt, now bear with the president, and give a man a job. If the old name of Roosevelt makes people throb, you take this message straight from the president and give a man a job.
So the idea there is that he wants after all that the government is doing in terms of fiscal policy, he wants the people to just start creating jobs as well, because that's going to be the way towards recovery. So basically, um, Jimmy Durante here, the guy in front, is basically saying, dude, Roosevelt's done all this stuff for us with the New Deal. He can't do it all. We all have to help out. So I want all of you to now just start creating jobs.
You look like a banker. Who drives your car? I drive it myself, have a cigar. Keep your cigar and hire a
So right, so there's the idea of rich banker says I drive myself to work, and Jimmy Durante says, "Dude, stop being like that. Hire a guy who doesn't have a job to be your chauffeur."
You look like a grocer. No, sir, my job's extermination.
That is one of the Three Stooges. I don't remember which one. He was like the lead one. I think it's like Larry. I think it's Larry. I don't know the Three Stooges that well, but that's one of the Three Stooges, just beginning in his career.
You must give your assistants each a nice weekend vacation, and I'll need more men to kill the rats. We want you to hire a crowd. You'll do good work if you hang out this sign that means no rats allowed.
So right, so the idea there is give everyone a weekend um, where they don't have to work, and then this guy saying, "Dude, I'll have to hire more people," and the guy says, That's exactly the idea."
What's the matter with you? I'm a very sick woman. Oh, hypochondriac. You must get a doctor for pneumonia, a doctor for insomnia, one for osmosis, and two for halitosis, one for anemia, and one for eczema, neuritis, bronchitis, phlebitis, St. or any other kind of an itis that will delight us. You must get a doctor for every disease you got. In that way, it'll give you lots of enjoyment. And in that way, madam, you will help to end unemployment. Now listen to me.
Right, so right there, help to end unemployment. The idea is that unemployment rate's too high during the Great Depression.
Everybody, step up. Get back at the president and give a man a job. You know he bought a front. You know that. I know it. So step up and give a man a job. You know who's in back of this in the NRA? No? Well, I'll tell you. And when I do, it'll give you heart attack. You take this message straight from the president and give a man a job.
No, look at that, right there. Sorry. I put this here because historically speaking, before the Great Depression, before Roosevelt, who's pictured right here, before Roosevelt, um, the government really didn't do very much about um, economic downtimes. The person who was president before him, Herbert Hoover, basically just said, "This is what happens in market economies. The market will fix itself." He was voted out of office. Roosevelt comes in and is like, I really need to do something here. So he just starts throwing massive amounts of money at the economy. It worked, kind of, for a few years until 1937. It got really bad. It turns out that the best form of fiscal policy that really ended the Great Depression was World War II, because fighting a two front war, the Germans and the Japanese, then the government was spending massive amounts of money. And that obviously ended the Great Depression. But within society, within American society, this picture right here, the official portrait of Franklin Roosevelt, um, you would see it in like every school, every bar. Well, because he actually overturned prohibition, which then made drinking legal again. Um, every bar, every restaurant, every home. There was a picture of Roosevelt, pretty front and center in the household. And um, my grandfather would tell this story, and I believe it to be true. Um, is that um, he was at, I think, like either a restaurant or a bar or something, um, and the person, I think had said, "Oh, that's a um, pretty bad picture of Roosevelt there. Like his cheeks are all like red and like he looks like he's blushing." Um, just normal kind of talk. Sitting at a bar and looking forward, and you see that picture of Roosevelt. and the bartender threw him out for making fun of the picture and making fun of the president. Um, and you can see these like there's some pretty famous pictures here where you can kind of see these things here. Right, but I mean something like this, right? So you'd have all these people at a bar, and then you'd have a picture of Roosevelt, right? So you'd be like staring forward, and you would just see that, right? And then, and it wasn't just that kind of thing, right? It was at multiple kinds of venues. I don't even know if that one up here. No, I don't know why they're showing that. Oh, because the bar is called the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel Bar. You would see him in homes. Let's see famous examples here. Um, but you would see these examples within homes. I don't see anything immediately apparent here, but you would see these kinds of pictures as well. But here, right here, is an example of fiscal policy at work. He hired artists who were out of work to paint murals on post offices. Um, he paid, you know, unemployed writers to write basically travel books to different states that people weren't didn't even have the money to go to. Um, I'm going into great detail here because it's after Roosevelt then that every presidential administration is in some sense defined by two things. Fiscal policy consists of either government spending or government taxation. And the idea with both of these I'm just going to get rid of this here so I can write something. Is that if the GDP, which we just learned about, if that is low, you want what's called expansionary fiscal policy. And what expansionary fiscal policy consists of. So when I write a triangle, that stands for delta. So change in government spending is positive, and or change in taxation is negative. Either you're taxing people less and or the government is spending more. If the GDP is too high, which is generally not considered a problem, um, you should use contractionary fiscal policy, which means that government spending would fall or taxation would rise. Now, this is just the outline, but no, let's not do that. Let's just focus. Let's just go right here. And that this fiscal policy can take two forms. It can be discretionary or non-discretionary, or instead of calling it non-discretionary, we could call it automatic. So discretionary policy means that the government makes a specific decision to do something because of something happening. So Roosevelt saying, let's create all these jobs for people, that was a discretionary fiscal policy. It takes time because you then, right, how a bill becomes a law, you got to get Congress to do what it does. You got to have the president sign it. You got to create an office that's going to spend the money, et cetera, et cetera. Non discretionary fiscal policy or automatic fiscal policy works a lot faster. You basically design the system so that certain payments go up when the economy is doing poorly. So, like when the economy starts to do poorly, more people need unemployment insurance, more people need food stamps, more people need Medicaid, that's the healthcare system for the poor. More government services are needed. And the nice thing about that is that you don't have to pass a law or do any of those kinds of things to get that kind of fiscal policy increase in spending. So I just said that all right here. Additionally, if you lose your job because there's a recession, you're not going to be paying as much in taxes. So you would see taxes going down, spending going up during a recession automatically without the government even having to get involved. The only time when you'd get the government involved is if you think that the scale of the economic problem exceeds what non discretionary or automatic fiscal policy can do. COVID being a pretty good example. Um, I don't know if there is such a list here, but let's just see. Um, let's just see if they have a single list here. And not monetary policy. We're going to look at that shortly here. Okay, so we had the American Rescue Plan. That was, wait, is that the thing that? That's the thing that Biden wants to do. Sorry, I think it was called the CARES Act. Isn't that the? Yeah, $2 trillion. $2 trillion. The CARES Act, largest spending bill ever for fiscal policy. Um, Loan for small businesses, expanded unemployment benefits. Right? Remember, we all got that $1,200 per adult, $500 per kid. Hospitals got a lot of money. Corporations got loans. Airlines got big chunks of money. State and local governments got money. Everyone got something. $2 trillion to basically stimulate the economy, to get the money spent. Largest rescue package in history. To put that in comparison, 2008 2009 Recovery Act was less than half that. So it was big, really, 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 really big, right? And you get that sense right here. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. The Paycheck Protection Program too. I forgot about that. And who did it go to? About a third of it went to households, or about a fourth of it. A fourth of it went to small businesses. A fourth went to large businesses, and then everyone else got in there and got the other fourth. All designed to provide $2.3 trillion in spending when people weren't spending the money otherwise. And that's on top of the money that would have been spent automatically for things like food stamps and other things. So, again, for discretionary policy, I've already kind of talked about what you would do here. If you're in a recession, you want to increase government spending, reduce or reduce taxes. If you're in an inflationary period, or basically really good economic times, you'd want to decrease government spending or increase taxes. Right now, we actually seem to be in an inflationary period. And Not for nothing, whatever your personal politics are, and you shouldn't, again, care what mine are. I don't necessarily care what yours are. Um, Remember Biden's, right? The thing that Biden's trying to do right now, and as I say this is January of 2022. Biden's trying to get that Build Back Better um, fiscal stimulus passed. It's supposed to do a lot of things, right? It gives um, just provides a lot of stimulus to the economy, and yet with 50 Democrats in the Senate, he can't get it passed. He can't get it passed because one of the senators who doesn't like it, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, won't pass it, won't vote for it because he says it will contribute to inflation. Now, personally, I don't necessarily agree with the extent of how much he thinks it will contribute, but I can't deny that he is, in some sense, theoretically correct. During the inflationary period, basically the good economic times that we're in right now, you don't want to be increasing government spending, you'd actually want to be decreasing it. The reason why this is typically not done is it's really hard to get voted into office if you're voting for the government spending less money. I mean, even Republicans spend a lot of money. We're not doing this kind of stuff here, so let's not. Um, this is a little bit more detailed than you need to do for this class, so do not worry about this kind of stuff. Nor this. So, where we start to see fiscal policy being quite effective is when we have these shocks, these unanticipated economic events. COVID being a great example of it. Other ones being like September 11th. The first time we fought Iraq would be the supply shock for oil and whatnot. Um, and usually, if the problem is severe enough, you can get Congress to pass something really quickly for you. Um, to basically, the fiscal policy then offsets the shock. So think of the shock as basically, right, even if I were just to draw a very simple demand and supply graph, this doesn't really represent well the economy. But think of a demand shock, right? So if COVID happens, people are buying less stuff, which basically represents the demand curve shifting inwards. And essentially, the graphically, what's trying to happen here is that you're basically replacing the reduced consumption by households with increased government spending, so that basically it offsets it and it brings the economy back to the original point. If you do it right, it's just very difficult to do it right. Typically, you either don't do enough or you do too much. In the 2008 crisis, we didn't do enough. And it seems like in this crisis, we did too much. Okay, so again, yeah, I'm not asking that you have this kind of detail. Nor for this. In general, economists today really don't believe that the government needs to be that interventionist. That basically we have enough automatic stabilizers in the economy to get us through most economic problems, most economic recessions. Um, and we really don't need to get too involved. Now, COVID would be an exception. Um, 2008 crisis would be an exception. But other than that, you really don't need to get too involved. Because again, the problem with engaging in um, fiscal policy from a discretionary standpoint is that it, outside of, well, even the pandemic, it took a month or two for it to kind of um, take form. Basically, it takes time to recognize that there's a problem, and then it takes time for Congress to pass a law to do it, and then it takes time to create the operational program to do whatever it is you're trying to do. Um, you may agree or disagree with Trump, but it just, and so you may then see um, the COVID as either a bad thing that happened to him or a good thing that you didn't have to deal with him any longer. Um, to be sympathetic to him, and that's a little bit difficult for me, just my own personal politics. But again, I don't. Um, that's just my opinion, and my opinion's about as good or as anyone else's. So if you disagree with me, that's fine. Um, it's just very difficult, right, for any president of any party to basically do this all during an election year when you're supposed to try to get reelected. It was just a tough task, and you know, um, you may say the president did this wrong or that wrong, but it's also just a very difficult task to set up the offices and whatnot to get things done. So when people didn't get their unemployment check right away, I'm not sure that was necessarily Trump's fault. It's just kind of the scale of everything that was trying to be done. And it's why, generally speaking, discretionary fiscal policy is not generally preferred by economists as a path. And that also gives rise to that kind of political business cycle where basically Trump was happy to kind of spend the money, and maybe in some sense the CARES Act was as big as it was because it happened during an election year. So everyone just wanted to flood the market with money, lots and lots of money, to try to get reelected or at least not lose. Um, and it didn't generally work. Um, for the most part, um, monetary policy, which we'll learn about in the next chapter, monetary policy has largely replaced um, the use of fiscal policy. It really wasn't until Bush the second, as president, really started to make use again of fiscal policy. And I do remember the one, 2003, I think 2001 or 2003. I remember we all got don't remember, I think it was $250 tax credit, but it wasn't really a tax credit. I remember getting the money, spending it, and then realizing it was just an advance on my tax refund. That kind of sucked. And the idea was that I was supposed to spend it. But it turns out that most people save their stimulus payments rather than spend it, which is kind of what happened too during this pandemic. Some people absolutely needed the payments and they spent it right away, but the majority of people saved it. And how do we see that in the data? Interestingly, we can, I think, right there. Look at that. People saving money not only because you have a pandemic, so people are like scared shitless, but also because people just had more money to save. And now we see that declining, which could be kind of scary. Um, this is more detail than you need. I'm not sure why. I mean, yes, don't worry about this part. And you see this during the Obama administration as well. You see this spending um, the stimulus payments to try to fix the economy after the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis. Um, I'm not sure I would say the evidence is mixed. I would say that unfortunately, we just didn't spend enough. I think one of the lessons of the 2008 2009 crisis was that just more money was needed. Um, and that in general, the Obama stimulus, with the most famous example being the um, shovel ready jobs, I think was what it was called. Shovel ready jobs need to be um, that there would be the shovel ready jobs would be created because the government would all of a sudden finance some big public works project. It just took too long. This was also the time during the Obama stimulus when we got cash for clunkers. You could turn in your old junky car and you would get a big, huge payment if you bought a new car that was more fuel efficient to turn in your old junky car. And then they would basically destroy your old junky car and not allow it to be sold, thus basically helping auto manufacturers, which had gone bankrupt and the government actually owned a stake in them. Okay. Let's just go back to this. This is a little bit of a shorter lecture. The other chapter will be a little bit longer here. Um, just going back to this here. Mm, I'm not watching something that's. I just want to look for one more thing. Oh, I know what I want. So during the Great Depression, there was basically an incredibly poor area of the United States known as the Tennessee Valley. In the Tennessee Valley, I mean, look, you can kind of see some pictures here. I don't know how long is that video. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna skip. Oh, dude, don't get Spectrum. Drop Spectrum if you have it.
The Tennessee Valley Authority.
Oh.
During
Okay, so you can kind of see it, right? Farms needed electric. Manufacturing firms needed electric. And so basically what the government did is it created an entire electrical system using dams. Today they use like nuclear power and solar power. But the idea was that if we can electrify a region of the country that's very poor, it won't be as poor as long anymore.
In the 1930s, there were few regions of the country that were worse off than the region known as the Tennessee Valley.
Dude, that looks poor.
Where is the Tennessee Valley? How did the New Deal help this area? The area known as the Tennessee Valley includes portions of Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and
Okay, so this is about the area of the Tennessee Valley. Still a pretty poor area, but the idea was let's basically electrify it, create lots of jobs.
For years,
I'm just going to jump ahead here.
That
So
dams,
inexpensive
power to millions of Southerners.
Southerners, refrigerators, crops, building it, all paid for by the government.
In South Carolina, resulted in a related deaths by 60 cases of dysentery, hookworm.
Okay, bad stuff. But that's again another example of fiscal stimulus. But again, the best would be World War II. That's really where you get it, where basically the government then has to buy lots and lots and lots of stuff that actually gets destroyed, which is a good thing if you're trying to stimulate the economy, because then it means you have to rebuild it. Geez, and where would we be if we didn't have World War II? It'd be a lot less on TV. Okay, so that ends this chapter, rather short chapter about fiscal stimulus. in the form of fiscal policy.